Welcome back to The Explainer. I am so glad you're here with me today because we are tackling something that, let's be real, almost every single one of us has dealt with at some point. You know the drill. You're lying in bed, absolutely exhausted, but your brain is just refusing to shut off. You start obsessing over the future, and suddenly you're totally consumed by late-night anxiety. Well, today, we're exploring a seriously fascinating approach to conquering that dread. We're going to learn how to stop letting anxiety eat you alive by actually leaning right into it. Yep, we are systematically planning for the absolute worst. So, what actually keeps you awake at night? It's a heavy question, right? For a lot of us, it usually kicks off with just one tiny thought. Maybe it's a little worry about your bank account, some random weird ache in your back, or just this creeping feeling that you are mentally burning out. And because it's 2 a.m., those worries, they expand. They blur together into this massive, formless dread that quietly drains your mind and your body. Honestly, it's incredibly validating to just acknowledge that this happens to the best of us. But here's the good news. We really don't have to stay stuck in that cycle of sleepless nights. To conquer that dread, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll look at the shape of anxiety. Then, we'll break our fears down into 3 core areas: financial safety nets, mental health interventions, and physical medical solutions. Finally, we'll wrap up with reclaiming your present. By the end of this, you're going to see that society actually has final safety nets already built in for your absolute worst-case scenarios.
All right, Section 1, the shape of anxiety. Let's really look at how fear functions when we let it run completely wild in the dark.
Notice the stark contrast here. Our source material makes a brilliant point. Anxiety is terrifying precisely because it doesn't have a distinct shape. When fear is vague and formless, it feels massive. It just silently eats up all your mental energy because, well, you don't even know what you're fighting. But, and this is a real game changer, by simply grabbing a piece of paper and writing down exactly what happens if you fail, like literally what happens if the money runs out or your health tanks, you shrink that vague, shadowy monster into a simple problem. Simple problems are specific, they are manageable, and most importantly, they have clear solutions.
Which brings us to the core philosophy of our source text today. Quote, "Preparing for the worst is not giving up. It is preparation." You know, so many people avoid thinking about worst-case scenarios because it's depressing. We just want to look away. But actually, scratch that. Anticipating the worst is what softens the shock if it ever does happen. When you've already mapped out rock bottom, you aren't paralyzed by the unknown anymore. You can actually take immediate, grounded action.
Moving right along to Section 2, financial safety nets. Let's tackle one of the heaviest burdens out there: the sheer terror of total financial ruin. If you follow that worst-case financial scenario all the way down, you lose your job, savings dry up, your income hits zero, what actually happens? Well, the source text points out a crucial societal mechanism: welfare, or public assistance. And it's important to note how impartially the text treats this. This isn't some special privilege for a select few. It is a fundamental right. It's a literal societal safety net designed specifically to catch you or anyone else whose livelihood has just come to a complete standstill. It exists exactly for that terrifying moment your bank account hits zero.
The absolute key takeaway here is this: just knowing the safety net exists creates mental space. Whether you ever actually need to use it is entirely beside the point. Just knowing there is a concrete floor beneath you, a final safety net, gives you immense mental breathing room. When you aren't backed into a corner, absolutely terrified of starving, your judgment isn't clouded by all that panic. You suddenly have the mental bandwidth to calmly plan your finances, boost your savings, and just handle your expenses today.
Okay, Section 3, mental health interventions. Let's talk about what happens when our mental capacity simply hits its breaking point.
The author gives us a pretty stark warning here. A lot of times, it's the most hardworking, diligent people who push right past their own limits without even realizing it. We have to watch out for these physical signs: sleepless nights, a sudden loss of appetite, or just an inability to enjoy the things you usually love. Listen, these aren't just quirky personality traits. These are physical alarms going off. It's literally your mind sounding the siren that everyday stress is just becoming too much and things are starting to collapse.
And the absolute worst-case scenario here? A complete mental breakdown. But, exactly like with our finances, there's a final safety net. And that brings us to psychiatric care. We really need to neutralize the stigma around this, like right now. The source heavily emphasizes that visiting a psychiatry clinic is absolutely not admitting defeat. Think about it. You wouldn't call going to a doctor for a broken arm a defeat, right? Psychiatric care is simply accessing the designated, standard medical option for your mind. It provides objective diagnosis and treatment, which extends your mental runway and gets you the support you need before you completely break. That takes us to Section 4, physical medical solutions. We've covered money and the mind. Now we have to address physical health and that awful 3 a.m. dread of an unexplained pain or illness.
When we feel a weird, unexplained pain, it is so incredibly common to just close our eyes and pray it goes away. Or worse, we go right into a WebMD spiral, right? But look at this crucial comparison. Ignoring symptoms only narrows your choices and lets that fear multiply in the dark. You just sit there, vividly imagining the absolute worst-case illness. On the flip side, early medical testing drags that monster right out into the light. Even if it is something serious, knowing about it early clarifies the situation. It maximizes your treatment options and puts you right back in the driver's seat.
If your health anxiety spirals all the way to the worst case, a severe illness or a major injury, you have to remember one incredibly comforting fact. Modern medicine, hospitals, and surgery are your final physical safety nets. Things that were totally untreatable just a few decades ago now have established routine surgical solutions. By consciously remembering that this vast, advanced medical infrastructure exists specifically to handle the worst physical outcomes, you can massively lower your day-to-day health anxiety. You don't have to cure yourself. Society has built a huge safety net to do that for you.
And finally, Section 5, Reclaiming Your Present. Let's discuss the absolute most important part of this whole framework. What are you actually supposed to do once you've acknowledged all these ultimate safety nets?
The source offers this incredibly clear 4-step procedure. Step 1. Identify the worst-case scenario. Be super specific. Step 2. Acknowledge the societal safety net, whether that's welfare, psychiatry, or surgery. Step 3 is where the magic actually happens. Once you've mapped out the absolute bottom and found the net, you have permission to drop the burden. You just don't need to endlessly ruminate on it anymore. Which leads perfectly into Step 4, focus on today.
Look, the honest truth is you cannot reduce anxiety to absolute zero. That's just part of the whole being human thing. But you can always have a roadmap. Having this roadmap, really having a concrete plan for the worst-case scenario, proves that you are actively, bravely facing your life. You've looked right into the dark, you've seen exactly where the floor is, and you've realized you aren't going to fall into a bottomless pit. So, now that your worst-case scenarios are handled, I want to leave you with one question. What will you enjoy today? You've mapped out the absolute worst, which means you've officially earned the right to enjoy the present. Are you going to listen to your favorite music? Go for a walk? Maybe just laugh with a friend? Use that newly freed up mental space to stop bracing for disaster and start actively living in the present. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you on the next one.